dare I say it, probably alcohol-fueled one evening, as can be the case. Maybe we should do something daft. So this idea was hatched. Why don't we ride some bikes from John O Groats to Land's End, but with really shit bikes and not use motorways? And we'll try and do it from sunrise to sunrise. So give ourselves 24 hours, which is one person says, yeah, that's a good idea. And then no one can back down then, can they? Everyone goes, yeah, I'll do that, you know.
On the 21st of June, 35 riders on bikes that were bought for less than £600 are going to ride over 1,000 miles through twisting A and B roads from Land's End to John O Groats, all within 24 hours. Which is an incredible test of endurance for both the riders and their machines. The only thing that is more incredible than that is that since the longest day challenge has been running, it has raised over £500,000 for Cancer Research UK. Now on the 21st of June, MyMoto and Claycross are running Pitstop 2 for the longest day challenge, and we're going to have riders coming and going from about 10 o'clock in the morning through to about 2 o'clock in the afternoon. So hopefully, if you watch this video and you're interested in the event, please come along and have a watch and support the riders. Ride along with them for sections of it if you wish. But we also thought we'd do a little video, interview the guy who is behind the longest day challenge, a guy called John McAvoy, and credit to him and all the volunteers who do this. It's an amazing event. So let's see what John had to say about the longest day challenge and how it came about. So this is John McAvoy, who is a journalist for Fast Bikes magazine. You are also part of the Bathans racing team with Michael Rutter and Storm Stacey. Yeah. And then you currently run the longest day up event. So you organise the event, the routes, who's going to be in it, all that kind of stuff.
Yeah, you're dead right. It's a few things that few plates spinning in my life, and you know, the thing that's been a constant for quite a long time is the longest day challenge. Originally it was called the longest day down because it actually ran the other way, ran from John O Groats down to Land's End, and its origin really is, it goes back to, well, it actually goes back to 2012. The first time I did it was in 2013, but the idea was formed in 2012, and it started on what was a motorcycle forum that was associated with Performance Bikes magazine, who I used to write for at the time, and they had this forum which is still going today under a different name, PB Evo it's called, but there was a bunch of guys on that who probably, dare I say it, probably alcohol fueled one evening, as can be. You know, on forums sometimes, like, you get guys on keyboards.
It spirals.
Shouting at each other, and it's all really like, you know, everyone's got a strut an opinion, and you get people falling out all the time on forums. Well, this was one of those rare occasions where actually, you know, the opposite was the case, and there was a small bunch of guys on this forum got together, myself included, and said, well, maybe we should do something daft. And it was around about the time Top Gear were doing all their, you know, daft challenges that they were doing, which was very popular. And so this idea was hatched. I can't take any credit for the actual idea or the format of it. It was a guy on the forum, goes by the name of Kevin Wilson, who actually came up with the, why don't we ride some bikes from John O Groats to Land's End? But here's the catch: they've got to be really rubbish bikes. And can I swear on this vlog?
Yeah, I can bleep it.
They were really shit bikes, and we'll ride from John O Groats to Land's End, and not use motorways. And on top of that, why don't we do it on the longest day of the year? And we'll try and do it from sunrise to sunrise. So give ourselves 24 hours to do the ride. And as I say, you know, as is the way, but sometimes as blokes, we're pretty simple creatures. One person says, yeah, that's a good idea, and then no one can back down then, can they? Everyone goes, yeah, I'll do that, you know. And so it was. And then on the longest day, 21st of June in 2013, we all met up at John O Groats. How many of us were there?
So you were riding in it this year?
I rode it. Yeah, no, I rode the first one. Yeah, I bought a I bought a 1980 something Kawasaki GPZ 750, like the one in Top Gun. Obviously, that's a 900, but that's style. Yeah, same color as well, red and black one. And I bought this bike, bought it on eBay for it was around 300 quid. It's just under, I think, and I thought I'd done really well until I went to pick it up. I bought it from Bristol, so I did the long drive all the way down to Bristol. I got to this guy's house and I was like, oh my God, this thing had been stood outside for 10, 12 years. So it's a really long time. And the guy said, look, you obviously didn't read the advert, did you? And I was like, no, I really didn't. all I saw was Maverick in Top Gun, and I kind of saw myself in that
flying from John O Groats to Land's End.
Exactly. I had highway to the danger zone in my head, and I wasn't buying at all with any kind of common sense or brain. It was all heart, no head. Anyway, I got this thing back home, and I got lucky. It was actually okay. It needed a little, just, going over really, and a bit of love, and it was fine. I did the ride on that. Rode it up to John O Groats, and who knew John O Groats is so far away? You get to Scotland, and you think you're nearly there, and you're only halfway, kind of thing. So anyway, we met up on the evening of the 20th of June at John O Groats, and set off the next morning. And there was no plan. There was no, that's literally all it was. There was no pit stops, which I know we're going to talk about soon. We just kind of set off and had a bit of a route, written down between us, and inevitably during the day, everyone kind of got split up from the group, and we rode down to Land's End, and I'll never forget, there was a really wild Atlantic storm blowing when I got there, and kind of got to this car park. You've been, haven't you, to the car park there? It's pretty desolate. There's not much there.
There's not much there.
The Atlantic kind of all around both sides of the car park. So I got there at, I think I got in about 11 o'clock at night, something like that, around about then. And there's this storm raging, so it was absolutely raging. Kind of got to this car park and there was no one else there, and I was like, well, I don't know what to do now.
How long do you wait?
That's it then, Anyway, cut a long story short, I wrote it all up and did a little, that was actually quite a good size feature in performance bikes at the time. And just thought, well, this is a daft story. People might like it. It's something to be put in the magazine. And the response through the magazine, through the readership of the magazine, was quite, I wouldn't go as far as to say it's overwhelming, but it was very, very big, and so the theme of the response was, how do we do this? I want to do that. How can we do this? And I kind of had never really thought past that point. And so there was a couple of guys in the office as well at PB who wanted to do it, and it just seemed obvious to me, to having done it, to just get these people and start telling them, right, you should do this and maybe think about that, and then if you want to carry on. And then I thought, wait a minute, why don't I just facilitate it for people, kind of thing. I've done it. I don't want to do it again. And the reason I don't want to do it again is because it was such a, I personally found it a real positive experience. I was quite affected by it positively, because obviously through it all, the having decided to do this daft ride, we also then said, well, let's try and raise some money for cancer research. And I had a couple of people in mind at the time who were going through that. And raised quite a bit of money. I think I raised 2 or 3 grand, something like that, roughly. And it just seemed like, well, actually, maybe there's a way here of keeping this going and carrying on raising some more money. I don't want to do it again, because having these people in mind and having raised so much money, I just felt if I tried to do it again, it would be. It might not be as good,
Yeah.
So that's really how it came about.
And you mentioned in the past to me about the last stretch of doing that run.
Yeah.
Is you emotionally
Oh,
completely spent.
yeah. I mean, yeah, and it doesn't matter which way you do it. I mean, since then, what I've done is I've actually reversed it. It's actually longest day up, which is why we renamed it Longest Day Challenge, because we thought, well, maybe one day it'll be something else and not even involve Land's End or John O Groats. Who knows? Just by keeping it generic. So we flipped it around, and so you go upwards now. And it was actually kind of like the same story when we used to go south. But the last 100 miles or so, which in its current format is from kind of like Inverness, really, I suppose, up
through Waking Up.
Up through Wicket, exactly, and into John O Groats. It's brutal because there's two things happening. It all catches up with you. It's a really, really long day. And, I say to people the night before, and you can see them looking at you thinking you don't know what you're talking about. But you say to them, look, the first, because it's roughly 900, depending which way the route goes, it's between 900 and 1,000 miles roughly. So it's a really long day, really, really long day. But, the days, it's a day out on a motorbike. That's actually all it really is in the end, and it's just, you just keep riding. But the first kind of 800 miles, 800 miles, actually really easy, really, really easy, because you're kind of wrapped up in this moment and the euphoria of the day, and it's usually the sun shining and there's lots going on social media, and you're going to the pit stops and you get made a fuss of every couple of 100 miles by all the people in the pit stops, and it's surprisingly easy to click off those first 4, if not 5 pit stops. But then, of course, the closer you get to the end, there's inevitably a point in time where and this is fatal, is when you say to yourself, I'm nearly there.
Yeah.
As soon as you have that thought, you're in big trouble, because you're not.
Yeah.
You still got a bit to go, but mentally your mindset changes from being completely in the moment and John O Groats being so far away, it's just not even a factor in your mindset, But as soon as you think, wow, I'm nearly at John O Groats, you see your first signpost for John O Groats, or Wick, as it actually would be, You think, wow, bloody hell, I'm nearly there. And then you kind of miss the bit on the end that says it's still 100 miles.
Yeah.
And those 100 miles many people will tell you, are as hard, if not harder, than the first 800. So it's a tough old bit, that last bit. And it's like marathon runners are the same, right, isn't it? They always say the last, I've never done that.
The last drag is just
doing one. But the last 5 miles are harder than the first, whatever it is, 18 would it be? I don't know how long's a marathon, 26 miles. Yeah, so at last first 20 miles or so.
I mean, I drove the broom wagon, the van that goes around picking up all the breakdowns. Was it 2018? I drove behind everyone.
It could have been, mate. They all blur into one, yeah.
Yeah. And I remember getting to the border of Scotland and going, oh, I'm nearly there now. Only got to get through Scotland. But I'd never driven up that far up Scotland.
Exactly.
And it is a long, long way. You're halfway there, aren't you, by that?
Exactly. And it's funny you say that, because, and that's one of the things, post-event that not a lot, in fact, I would actually be bold enough to say every person who's done this, when they have finished and like the morning after, they all, the sense of adventure is massive, because as you just said, they touched on the point, that how many of us have ever actually been that far? Not necessarily ridden that far in a day, but just that, gone beyond Loch Lomond, and into Glencoe, and people who are lucky enough to make reasonable time during the day get to Glencoe for sunset, and it is just, wow, I rode here.
Yeah.
And that's your reward almost, as the sun sets. It is mind blowing, and it's on our doorstep,
Yeah, there's some very surreal moments, especially going through Scotland when it's dark, but it's not dark, and
amazing.
It's some very strange things and like you say, it almost becomes a blur. I remember we went through a T-junction at about, I think it would have been about 4 o'clock in the morning,
Wow.
somewhere. I don't know where it was, and there was a police road check, Joe, where they were pulling
Oh
everyone
yeah, I
over.
remember that. Yeah, there was roadworks or something, wasn't
Yeah,
there?
and
They
we
had
were
a
like,
diversion.
I said to the officer, pull me over, and she went, "Where are you going?" And I went, John O Groats.
Yeah.
And she went, "Where have you come from?" I went, "Land's End." She went, "I guess you want to carry on, don't you?" And I was like,
Please,
"Just let me go." And
please
she went,
don't
"Right,
let me
go
go
on."
on a diversion. And that diversion is probably only a mile or two,
Yeah,
but
yeah,
at that moment, it might as well be 100 miles.
yeah. So the current criteria,
Yes.
obviously it's changed direction now. It's Land's End up to John O Groats. The bikes, what's the
So
price limit on what you're allowed
yeah,
to
well,
enter?
do you know what? A few years ago, I upped the price limit to 600 quid. It used to be 300 quid. And then I upped it to 600 quid because, to be blunt, it was getting because the event's been going on so long. It became apparent that it was basically becoming harder and harder and harder to get something for 300 quid. When we first started doing it, you could buy a shitty old neglected GPZ 750 that hadn't run for 10 years and everything was corroded and seized on it. You could buy one of them for 300 quid. They're just not even out there now, not even in boxes,
Yeah.
So I upped it to 600 quid. And then last year, so if I rewind a year or two, there was a guy showed up at Land's End and he showed up on a, I shouldn't laugh. I'm laughing at myself. I should add for what I'm about to say. But this young fella showed up at Land's End and he was on like a nearly new or a really, really good condition. Obviously not 600 quid Phaser 600. And I kind of went up to him and said, not really in the spirit, is it? Kind of thing. I mean, I'm not going to stop anyone or whatever. And he said, yeah, it used to be my dad's and he died of cancer and I really wanted to do it on his bike. And I was like,
Yeah.
do you know, I had nothing.
Fair enough. Yeah.
I had nothing. In fact, I shook his hand and said, do you know what? I'm glad you've chosen that bike. And so it kind of planted this little seed in my head. I thought, well, how much do we really care about? Okay, that was the original format and we'll carry that on, of course, because that's, what some people will want to do. They will want to do it in the same format as it was originally. But then, in my mind, if someone wants to, make a case, let's say, for a bike that maybe belonged to a relative or a loved one, and they're no longer with them, then I got zero problem with that. Equally, the kind of reason for putting a really low price limit on it was to create a sort of almost like a secondary part to the challenge, which is the sort of preparation side of it, doing up an old knackered bike and getting into that, because we kind of closed the book on entries 6 months before. So it kind of like the challenge started for these people back at Christmas who were doing this year's event, because they've all had to go out onto eBay or Facebook Marketplace or wherever and try and find a cheap bike, and then they've got 6 months to make it good and obviously get through an MOT. And by the way, the price limit doesn't include safety things. So it's
getting it prepared,
including tires, brake, and you can spend as much as you want on brakes and tires and chains and sprockets and that kind of thing. It's just really the getting the bike running,
purchase of the bike,
purchasing and making it good. That's kind of where the price limit is. But so we had someone. If I say last year, I could be wrong. As I say, they do tend to blur into one. But there was a guy did it. I'll say last year, it might not have been, but he did it on an R1. A guy called James Sargent, who's a repeat offender.
That was last year. Was
it? Yeah, and and that bike was it might have been a stolen recovered. James will probably correct me on this, but all I do know is he bought that bike in boxes, and it was in a really, really bad way. Like, I think it had been on fire, and we had Nigel Ray. He built an S-Rad. No, Nigel's S-Rad had been in a fire. So these bikes are dead.
Yeah,
dead bikes. But a little bit rough.
The bikes in themselves have got a story to tell almost as well.
Exactly. Yeah, no, you're dead right. So these bikes clearly are not 600 quid bikes, obviously, but at the start of the challenge, at the point where the entry is confirmed, like I say, back at Christmas time, these bikes are dead bikes. They are fit for scrap. They're not even fit for breaking and selling parts from. So I got no problem with that either, as long as there's a challenge kind of thing. I'm quite relaxed about sort of applying the price limit firmly. Not that I could anyway. I mean, what am I going to say to anyone at Land's End who shows up on a brand new GS? It's kind of up to them really if they want to do it that way. I can't stop them. It's a public road. So.
There was the year when I did it. The same guy, James Sargent, he'd been building a bike to do it on that was a budget bike, and there was a mechanical issue, and it broke down when he was leaving. He ended up going back, picking up his pretty much not immaculate, but a real nice 998, was it? No, 996.
Yeah, there might have been a 916 or 996. Yeah, one of them.
And he ended up doing it on that, which again, it's almost like it's better to go back and get you another bike and do it and still complete it than just go, I broke down. And
that's what I say to people. Inevitably, there's usually a call or two in the days leading up to it from people who say, I just can't get this bike to run. I've given up. Yeah, what can I do? And I say, look, you've got sponsorship in. This is going to be a tough day on a GS. This is a tough day, so don't worry, you're going to suffer. You know what I mean? This is not. We're not baking cakes here to raise money for cancer.
When James finished on that Ducati,
he was ruined.
He was ruined. His wrists are done. His chain was jumping. Yeah, it was. The
other thing that's worth mentioning is that I've kind of got a really strict. We went through a phase where people were trying to do it on little scooters and Groms and stuff like that, and they just can't do it, and it creates a load of delay and effort for the guys in the broom wagon. Like you helped, and that's what I do now. I bring everyone's luggage up, and there's broom wagons at the pit stops, which I'm sure we'll come on to in a bit. But I in the end I said no, we can't do 125 scooters. So there is a capacity limit. Everything's got to be at least 250 cc's. And ideally not a scooter, because history tells us they just don't make it. There's almost like a 100% failure record. There are exceptions. We had one guy who did it on some Chinese thing he built, and he dismantled it and put it in his boot of his mate's car and then drove home from where was it, John O Groats that year. That was impressive. And he had oven gloves on the handlebars for handlebars. Yeah, I remember. I can't remember his name. Really clever guy, but of course there's exceptions. But the failure rate of those with small capacity bikes and scooters is very, very high, and so I've kind of banned those basically.
And some of these bikes that do enter, they end up getting sold onto next year's entrants.
Recycled.
They're going round and round and getting.
You do actually. No, you're dead right. So you see quite a lot of the same people, as we've said. James is one of them. There are lots, and I'm very reluctant to try and name names because I will inevitably forget someone. So, but there are a lot, and so any one of them who are watching this, you know who you are, and thank you. But there are, I would say, a kind of a hardcore 10 or so people who every other year, because you can only do, once you've done it, you can't do the next year, to let new people in, who come back every other year, I would say, and sign up straight away. And it's the same with the bikes, as you say. You see the same people. There's a core of people who you see, and then there's this core of bikes that just keep getting sold. Passed around. Oh, I've seen that bike. Well, you'd be all right on that bike, and all the rest of it.
Yeah. So we're looking at this year. It's on a Saturday.
Yes.
Which is, I think it was a Thursday last week. Last year it was on a Thursday. But I'm kind of hoping, because we're going to run Pitstop 2 from our clay cross shop, so MyMoto and clay cross. Hopefully we're going to get people to come and support the riders as they're coming and going, because it's on a weekend. But yeah, so there's 5 pit stops, is that right, along the way?
Yeah, so the pit stops thing came about because it was just kind of like how the events evolved over the years. I am still learning. When I first started doing it, I kind of get everyone together. Well, at the very beginning, like I said, we were doing it from John O Groats to Land's End. Now, obviously, it's the other way around, but either way, you know, you'd kind of wave everyone, right, see you, everyone, and that would be the last you see of them. And then we'd all be sat at John O Groats or Land's End, depending which way we were running it, wondering where everyone was and when they might arrive. And to put it bluntly, they were kind of like really, really stressful hours because, you know, you worry about these people. I mean, it's you know, it's a long ride and it's on a public road, and we all know that there's risks involved with that, even just riding down to the shop. So, you know, we do worry about these people when they're out there. So they were tense hours, let's say, until everyone was in. Then actually it might have been my wife, I'm not sure, but anyway, came up with this idea: why don't we make them go to somewhere on the way, make them stop off, so we know they get off the bike for a rest, so we know someone else with fresh eyes can check their bike over, and so we can be told when, where they are and when. We know where the pit stop is, and if there's someone at that pit stop telling us they left at this time, we start to build a picture of what how the day's playing out. Now, since then, last year, we were approached by Bike Track, who do the tracking devices, security devices for, well, I was going to say bikes, but I suppose they could go on anything, but mainly bikes based there in Silverstone. They came on board and said, look, we really love what you're doing and all the rest of it, and can we help? And I said, you know what would be mega is if we could have a tracker on each bike. It's like this dream scenario where with an app on your phone, you can see
the progress of everyone.
Yeah. And I kind of said, well, yeah, that'd be really mega if we could do that. But I'm not expecting you to help because we've got 30 or 40 riders kind of thing. We've got 50 this year. And then for them to like fall off their chair and go, well, that's too much for us. But absolutely fair play to the guys at Bike Track. They didn't even blink. They said, yeah, no problem. So they lend us enough trackers to put one on each bike. So we get to see where everyone is throughout the day, which also helps with us positioning the broom wagon, because we don't just jump in the wagon and fire straight. We try and be clever and just position ourselves near everyone. We take the motorway in the van. Don't get me wrong, we have a far less stressful day, but we're never actually far away. You know, we're within distance. And it makes that a lot easier. So having that live information, and of course the other side of that is we provide the login details to the riders' families, so they can
watch the progress.
So it's absolutely gold-plated information, that is. And as I say, massive thank you to the guys at Bike Track. But your pit stop at MyMoto, just while I think of it, because you mentioned it there, the one you guys are doing, you know, by the time they get to you, it'll be right in the middle of the day, I think.
I think it was 11 o'clock. We had the first rider come in.
Prime time. If any of your customers or anyone in the local area are out on their bikes or whatever, you know, to head down and get a coffee and see the riders come through and maybe join them. Like ride up to pit stop 3 with him. It's a brilliant ride. The route is, you know, fantastic. You know, if some of your customers want to do that, I would absolutely encourage that, because it's a great day out. You know,
that tracker element was actually really handy for the pit stop. We knew when the first rider was kind of due, but it was also amazing to see how wide it stretches out.
Yeah, it does.
So I mean, the guys at pit stop 5, is it 5? Yeah,
5's the last one. Yeah.
So by that, it must be.
Yeah.
6
yeah,
hours.
no, you're dead right, and it's natural, and you know, there's that in itself presents a couple of challenges. The first and second, and even to a lesser degree third, but certainly the first and second pit stops are all done and dusted pretty quickly, because they're early on in the ride. So the length of the I don't know what you want to call it, line of riders. First guy and whoever's at the front and whoever's at the back of the line is relatively short. So the time difference between the first guy coming through the first pit stop and the last guy is probably only an hour or so, maybe 2 at the most, you know. But by the time they get to pit stop 5, they can be like 8 hours apart. Pit stop 4 is an interesting one, because that's a ferry. It's actually at a ferry terminal, Gourock to Dunoon, which was a suggestion made by a good friend of the event, Nigel Ray, who's been involved as a rider and as a helper for many years. And he suggested taking everyone over the ferry because, again, it forces a rest. It forces everyone to get off their bikes for at least half an hour. It's just one of these little ferries that goes across the bay, you know, and people have seen dolphins off that. And usually, like I say, it's early evening, so it's a really nice time of day to be doing that kind of thing. But that's the fourth pit stop. But the point there is there's also a cut-off because there's a last ferry. So watching the tracker and seeing where everyone is, we're able to predict who's not going to make that ferry and advise them to not even go that way on the route, and in fact to, you know, basically take the motorway.
Bypass.
To bypass it just for a short bit. Otherwise, they're going to end up going all the way out to Gourock, which is right out in the west, west of Glasgow, for nothing, only to have to come all the way back. Heartbreaking. So we're able to see that in advance. We can see what they can't see because of these trackers, you see. So send word out to the riders: don't go. You're going to miss it. I can tell you now, you're going to miss the last ferry.
Yeah.
So
I think the ferry was first done the year I was the broom wagon.
Was it? Right. Okay. Yeah.
We ended up, so we were running behind. We were supposed to be missing it, but one of the riders who got on the ferry broke down. A girl called Hayley Bell.
Hayley, yes.
And she ended up coming back on the ferry again to meet us, and then we had to do the detour round and carry on.
You did, so you know exactly what I'm talking about.
Yeah, it ended up, I think it was a 27-hour drive, but that was, I think now you've got a few broom wagons along the way who just
So what's happened is, and none of this is planned. It's just how it's evolved, and it blows my mind at how kind people can be, you know. And the vast majority of people who run the pit stops are people who've done the ride. And of course, the longer the ride goes on, the more people do the ride. And rather like myself said, I did it, I don't want to do it again, but I want to stay involved and I want to help. So we've got, each pit stop's now got their own WhatsApp groups. There's probably 15 or 20 people, and they're there either like I say, to make a fuss of the riders when they come in and provide tools. I mean, your setup's really quite unique because you have a really good facility there. But you know, the first pit stop's a car park at a petrol station in Cirencester. So those guys have got to bring pop-up things and toolboxes, and they bake cakes and all of this kind of stuff. But what's happened is to ease the burden and the stress on us in the broom wagon at the back. People now are stationed at each pit stop with a van, kind of like on standby. So that frees us up, like I said earlier, to jump on the motorway and provide some support, but from a distance. But primarily the aim for us is to get to John O Groats before everyone else, because we have everyone's luggage in the van as well, and get the lodges up there open and ready to go and all the rest of it.
Yeah. So with the event having run so long and obviously raising money for Cancer Research UK, do you know what impact you've had over all those years? How much you've raised?
Do you know? Again, it doesn't seem real when I tell you that in the lifetime of the event we've raised nearly £550,000 for Cancer Research. The last 2 years, each class, let's say, so the group of riders, let's say, for the last couple of years have raised over £100,000. In one day, which is, I don't think I'll ever fully understand how the hell that happened. But I'm glad. It's a really nice accident, but it is. So we've got great support from the people at Cancer Research. We've got our own rep assigned to us to provide us with all the support and help we need, whether it's marketing stuff or setting up the giving page or whatever. I can tell you that they are, it's not just words, they are genuinely appreciative. That is a serious amount of money by any measure. If we're making 100,000 a year now, for the next 2 or 3 years, let's say we're on our way to £1 million for the guys at Cancer Research, who obviously need they depend and rely exclusively on fundraising and to do the work that they do.
That's incredible amount of money, and and testament to you and the event that it's done that kind of money.
Well, I'm certainly not going to, and I never would take full credit for it at all. You know, it's a terrible cliche. I know it's a terrible cliche, but it is in this case absolutely true. But it is a group of people who make this happen. It really isn't just me. I do the organising up front and talk to people and whatnot. But there's a core of people behind who step up every year and do stuff that I can't do, whether it's social media or web design or pit stops. I can't do the pit stops because I'm in the van, so I need it's graphic designs, even things like the logos and the graphic designs that you see. I don't know how to do that. I need help with that. So it's when you see anything to do with Longest Day, it really isn't just me, and that's not me. That's not just words. That's not just words. That really is the case. It would be impossible to do on my own. I wouldn't do it on my own. Let's put it that way. So,
as a final point, if someone watching this was wanting to enter, obviously it's a bit late now for this year. But if someone was interested in entering, what's the best thing to do?
So, well, from a practical point of view, you can reach out to us through the social media channels. It might take a little while to get back to you, but I've got a guy who looks after all of those channels. The website will have a contact page on it. We're in the process of updating the website. But before, what I would say to anyone, so just reach out and say you want to add your name to the list of people to be kept in touch with. Because what will happen is we'll finish this year, we'll get back home. I'm looking at my calendar now, we're end of June. It'll be my birthday when we get back. So we'll be doing that. And then, to be perfectly honest and to be perfectly blunt, I'll kind of just switch off from it for a month because it's quite consuming, And then between then and Christmas, because the shortest day of the year, of course, is the 21st of December, and that's the day that traditionally we open the book. And what we'll do is collect all the names of people who, between the end of this year's event and then, we'll keep a record of them and do nothing for 6 months. It'll be 5 months, won't it? I suppose. Literally do nothing, and then on the 21st of December we'll reach out to all those people who have left their details with us and say, okay, right, we're going to do this again. Are you still interested? You got in touch with us in August or July, whenever it was. Are you still interested, or was that because people's circumstances change? You want to do something in 6 months' time and you have all the intention of doing that, but stuff happens, and that might change. But what I would say to anyone who's thinking of doing that, to have a think about it first. Just be sure you know what you're letting into. It's a really, really long ride. It's not easy. It really isn't easy. You need to set aside quite a bit of time in terms of preparation, not just of the bike. The guys that are doing it this year, we have a WhatsApp group, and I make it really, really clear, quite bluntly, to them all in advance. So you cannot just show up at Land's End and do this ride. You cannot do that. You will get into trouble. You will suffer unnecessarily if you do that. You have to set time aside and plan in some rides. Not necessarily on your challenge bike, on any bike. You need to do a number of 500-600 mile days or more if you can. And that takes time just to do that in terms of preparation. And if you can't set that kind of time aside, I've been quite blasé about it, buy a shit bike, do it up, then ride it from Land's End to John O Groats. You got to ride to Land's End first, from wherever you are, and then you got to do the challenge, and then you got to ride home. It's actually 2,000 miles.
2,000 miles, yeah.
In a very short space of time, literally 3 or 4 days. And that's not easy, even for quite experienced riders, because how many people regularly do more than even 100 miles in a day. You know, most people jump on their bikes and enjoy them on a weekend for a couple of hours, like we said earlier. You know, they'll ride out to the shop and get a coffee, and that's their fix kind of thing. This is much more than that. And you, as I say, you can't just show up and do it. You really
got to be mentally prepared,
mentally and physically prepared. You know, you in the run up to it, you need to be doing. You need to be making yourself. You need to be setting aside. That's the word I'm looking for. You need to be setting aside enough time to do several big days in the saddle. Even if it's on your modern bike, your posh bike, it doesn't matter, you know. And if you can't do that, then really, I would recommend this is not the challenge for you. Yeah, I would strongly recommend you find another way to raise money. But that would be my number one tip. That element of preparation and putting in the yeah. So
well, I'm looking forward to it. I can't wait.
I
think you fly past and carry on, but we
do.
All the riders, so.
We do. You're just a little bit. Claycross is just a little bit. It's a shame because I'd love to come in and see you guys. Obviously, we've been pals for a long time, and I would love to pop in and see you guys and say thanks to obviously everyone who's at that pit stop. It's something I do like to try and do during the day. We usually call in at pit stop 1 because we're about ready for a coffee then because we've been going since 4 a.m. So we usually call in there, and it's on the route. 2 usually gets bypassed. Because it's a bit far off the road, and B, we're kind of in catch-up mode at that point. 3 is pretty epic. That's at Guy's Hamlet, just outside Preston, which is an incredible place, and they usually have spectacular food and hospitality there, and we are ready to get out of the van at that point and have a break. So we usually stop there, and it's just off the motorway. We skip 4 as well because, as I said earlier, that's a bit off the beaten track for us. But we'll always go in and see the guys at pit stop 5, which is the Highland Tours guys. They run out of their unit there, which is they've done it for years, and they're absolute bloody legends. I have to give a special shout out to them. I know this is a vlog for pit stop 3, but I really do need to give a big shout out to the guys at 5 because, as you said earlier, they're the ones who have to spend the longest there, and usually the first rider doesn't arrive until about midnight. So they put the longest and latest and coldest shift in of all the pit stops, and I'm always blown away by their enthusiasm, let's say, for that hour of the night, and I'll forever be eternally grateful to everyone, of course, who steps up. But the guys at 5 are absolute. They do the hardest shift.
I mean, we obviously did. I think we were about between 11 and 1 o'clock. We had our riders through on the Thursday when we did it last year. I finished work, gone home, slept all night, woke up the next morning to check
still going on,
and they were still coming through pit stop behind me. You're like, it's
mad, isn't it?
Crazy event, isn't it?
Yeah, no, you're right. And that's it. So I think those guys up there on 5 absolutely deserve a medal, all of them. And the guys who we always get a contingent from Inverness who come down. The Highland division, they're regular. They're some of the regular offenders, repeat offenders, and when they're not doing it, they tend to manage that. But when they are doing it, their partners and friends, they manage to cajole them all into do it. And I will be. That is not a pit stop I would want to run, but like I say, it's the latest, longest, and coldest one there is, and I would say as well, probably one of the most important, because that's the point in the ride where the riders probably need
it the most. Need it egging on that last bit.
Yeah. So hats off to those guys up in Inverness for sure.
As a closing bit, what is the craziest thing, bike, ride, whatever you've ever, or the one thing that sticks out in your mind from?
Oh my God! That's a really, really good question. I'm searching for an answer here. There's a lot of standout, moments and people and bikes. There's and some of it's very heartfelt and heartbreaking. You know, there's people show up and they've got photographs of children on their bikes who have died. You know, and that's their motivation, and that just makes you go, wow. And then there's someone who'll show up on a bike, you know, like that they've literally built in their shed, like the guy on the Chinese scooter, and you think, you know, wow, he did it. He bloody did it. How the hell?
Yeah.
How
Against
the hell?
all the odds.
That makes no sense. You know, we had a guy who was I don't know, he might still be actually, but certainly at the time he was a this is quite funny actually. He was part of the counter-terrorists police in well, I better not say where, but anyway, somewhere in the UK. And he had to be really careful about his identity and all this kind of stuff. So he changed his name, and we had to do all of that with him, and you know, use different pictures of him online and this kind of thing. We had to be really careful. That was an interesting challenge. We had a guy. We've had women come and do it who are cancer survivors. You know, good friend of mine. You know, Kaz.
Yes.
You know, she did it, having survived it. We've got the stories and the human side of it are amazing. We had a guy who showed up, and he was oh no, what was he on? Let me try and think. What bike was he on? It was the maddest bike. He'd got this bike and he'd modified. I can't remember what the bike was, but the modifications he'd done to it, like, they were really like bodges. And when I say modifications, I'm being kind.
Like cardboard and duct tape.
They were properly bodged up, and he'd got about 4 or 5 sets of footrests that he could put his feet in different positions in and just hold on. And he'd come up with this homemade kind of cruise control setup and drinks holders, and you know, he'd modified his bike to hell, but it was all like really badly done, but it was all actually really, really useful stuff. It was genius. So
all there for a purpose. Just
exactly, yeah. And you get people show up on bikes. They'll paint their bikes with, like, you know, that paint that they do on blackboards.
Yeah, like chalkboard paint. Yeah,
that's it. Yeah, chalkboards, and they show up on that, and they've had people write messages on them and all that kind of stuff. It's that sort of thing that stands out the most. You know, it's the people.
A little bit like wacky races, but it's not a race. It's just
mate, when you see them set off at Land's End, it's hilarious, because the noise is just like, there's blown exhaust, there's rattly cams, there's cam chains. You know, you just watch them ride out the car park at Land's End, and you go, God.
Already running on one cylinder when the should be two.
Well, Hayley Bell, you mentioned her earlier. She was in the car park at Land's End the day before, and I was like, that is not making it to Pitstop 1.
And he got all the way to Glasgow, didn't he?
It got to the bloody ferry,
yeah. And it's she said after she got it back, she
had little unicorns all over it, didn't she? She had like crystal balls, not crystal, whatever they're called. You know, those stick-on things. It's almost as though, like, people get these really shit bikes and they decide to do all the things to this bike that they've always wanted to do to their good bikes but never dared. It's like they go mad on these bikes, and you get a right mixture of stuff. Yeah,
shows the characters involved as well.
It really does. And I suppose on the back of that point, one last thing I would say about it, that is one of the things that the drive home for us in the van is interesting the next day, you know, because inevitably you're just kind of unpacking it all. It's done. There's no more stress. There's nothing to worry about. Everyone said goodbye and everyone's gone their own way. So that drive home's a long drive, and you have lots of time to sort of, you know, just sort of digest it all and unpack it all a little bit. And you know, and there's always 100 stories and, you know, moments of real, you know, memories. But the thing that I always take away every single time, above all else, which is quite cool actually, is that we do this photo at the sign at John O Groats with everyone who's still there. We get all the bikes lined up, and there's the signpost, the classic sort of, picture. And you know, like in motorcycling, there's kind of some groups. You're a sports bike rider. You do track days. Even if you do track days, there's fast grip, slow grip, middle. You're in everyone's always in. You're defined by. You do motocross. You do off-road.
What bike you're riding, or
what bike you ride. What group you're in on the track day. Whether you know what I mean. We're all kind of defined, and someone looks you up and down and he goes, he's a sports bike rider, therefore he's, a flash kit, or he's an adventure rider, therefore he's a beardy, he's part of the beardy brigade, or whatever. But that, and I'm being flippant, but you know what I mean. But that event's interesting because you get everyone lined up there, and by that point, of course, you've got to know everyone, and there will be the sports bike track day, there will be the old guy, there will be the kid in his 20s, there will be the fella, let's say, in his 60s or 70s we've had, there will be, let's say, the guy who loves his track days, there'll be a guy who rides a Harley, and it's the only event I can think of that I've been to where there's a load of bikers and they're all completely different. They're all from all walks of life and they all ride all different types of bikes. There's motocrossers, there's sports bike, all of it. All motorcycling life is there. But for that one day, they are all the same.
Got one. Yeah.
And I think that's quite, I can't think, if you go to a MotoGP race, let's say, everyone there is a sports bike fan.
Yeah. But then you're a fan of Rossi, or you're a fan of,
and you're still
segregated, aren't you?
None of that. It is one group of riders, and the other thing on the back is the WhatsApp groups from. Well, I've got one on my phone. I think the 2022 one is still active, and they leave as friends forever. They really do. And I'm not just saying that as a sort of a meaningless comment. They really do. Those WhatsApp groups are still active from years ago, and I find that element of it is always an interesting sort of study in, I suppose, not study, observation. In human behaviour and how this group of actually diverse group of motorcyclists, never mind people, they're diverse as people anyway, all different kinds of people, but all their motorcycling interests are diverse as well. And yet, there they all are, brothers in arms, genuinely, and friends. All those divides are crossed for one day.
Yeah. Well, thanks for taking the time to come and tell us all about it. I'm looking forward to obviously running the Pitstop 2 again this year, along with a load of other volunteers who are all coming along to help out. It's not just the staff at the shop. We've got the usual kind of people who are all going to come and help. Hopefully it's another good year, and maybe someone watching this decides to bite the bullet and go for it themselves.
Yeah, absolutely. And hey, listen, thanks for having me on. It's a subject, as you can probably tell, I'm quite passionate about. Even after all this time, it means a lot, and I'm sure certainly the cause that it's all aimed at supporting means a lot to a lot of people. And massive thanks to yourself and obviously everyone else at MyMoto for taking over your car park for a day. But I'm sure it'll be a good day, especially if the sun's shining. But make sure you make a big fuss out of our guys this year.
I will be doing. Cheers. Thanks, John.
Thanks, Phil.
See you.